Oh, Jesus. No description can equal this. Oh, my God. Oh, wow. Oh, I'm telling you.
Holy hell.
Oh, my goodness me.
God. This is nuts.
Oh, wow. I can't believe this.
All right, all right, all right.
Welcome to the Young Turks. Cenk Ugranik is sparing with you guys. Probably lots of rage on the show. Some fun as well. Oh my God, weightlessness. I hope we get to that story. All right, so the two guys, set of folks I'm gonna rage most about are corporate Democrats and Sanjay Gupta. So you have that to look forward to, all right?
Gupta's gonna get it.
And then he'll probably come on here and apologize to me.
No, that never happens with us.
So. No, with us, of course, it'll never happen, right?
But it's okay, we don't need apologies.
Okay.
So yeah, we are gonna discuss his appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast. But before we get to any of that, let's talk a little bit about something that we need to debunk because Big Pharma is spending big bucks on convincing people of a massive lie. So. The lobbying group that represents major pharmaceutical companies is launching a 7-figure ad campaign in an effort to defeat the Democrats' plan to lower drug prices through the budget reconciliation bill. Now, what that bill would do, if it ever passes, what the proposal would do is allow for Medicare to negotiate drug prices directly with pharmaceutical companies, allowing for lower drug prices. Right now, Medicare can't do that, which is insane. Now, pharmaceutical companies don't like that, so the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, also known as Pharma, announced Wednesday that it is launching a 7-figure ad campaign against the proposals moving through Congress to lower prescription drug prices. Now, if you're wondering what these ads might look like and what type of lies they might tell, we'll give you an example.
I'm Sue and I have type 1 diabetes. I depend on Medicare to get my medicines. It's not always easy, but I make it work. Now some in Congress want to make things even harder. They want to repeal a protection in Medicare that protects access to my medicines. They call it negotiation, but it really means the government decides what medicines I can get. That would make it harder for people on Medicare to get the medicines we need. Medicare means access. Please don't take that away.
Paid for by Pharma.
Now, one thing that gives me a little bit of hope was the like to dislike ratio on that video. Seems like most Americans are privy to the fact that there's a profit motive behind this effort with pharmaceutical companies wanting to charge us considerably more for pharmaceutical drugs compared to other countries. But no, there's nothing in the bill indicating that the government will choose which drugs will be available to Americans. This is just an effort, and I think a common sense effort to ensure that we're not being price gouged for the same drugs that people pay far less for in other countries. The Congressional Budget Office, by the way, estimated that the House Democrats' leading bill, known as H.R. 3, would save the government almost $500 billion over 10 years on prescription drugs and lower the cost of drugs by about 50% by allowing the Secretary of Health and Human Services to negotiate prices. And so again, that cuts into the profits of these pharmaceutical companies, which is precisely why they're putting out this extremely expensive ad campaign full of lies meant to scare Medicare patients.
Yeah, so now let me give you their best case scenario and you'll see how absurd it is, and then we'll work backwards. So they say, oh, there's one study, Big Pharma, the drug companies that are overcharging you apparently by $500 billion. So now, do you think they're gonna fight hard and spend a lot of money to keep an extra $500 billion? This is their number one priority, because that is exactly how much they're robbing you by. So the prices, as Anna just told you, are now, could be cut in half. Could be cut in half, we all know it, everybody knows it. Cut 50%. So what's the extra 50% for? It goes straight into their executives' pockets and their shareholders' profits. It's highway robbery, $500 billion robbery. Okay, it's happening right now. It's in the middle. We're in the middle of it. So what is their incredibly weak excuse for that robbery? They say, well, look, there's a study that came out, and they say over a 10-year period, out of the 300 drugs that we're all going to develop, we might not develop 8 out of the 300 if this bill passes. Well, I did the math on that. That's under 3%.
And I don't believe them.
Okay, that study's horse crap. And which 8 drugs, right? What are we talking about here? And almost all the research is paid for by the American government, not by the drug companies. So every part of it is already BS. But even if you took their best case scenario, they say, now look, guys, you would get to save $500 billion, but you'd only have over 97% of the drugs we would produce. Wow, what a compelling argument.
Right, so the argument that they're making is, listen, we need those profits because we then take those profits and invest it in the research and development of new drugs. But that's not true. In fact, there was a great exchange between an executive over at AbbVie and Representative Katie Porter in regard to the amount of money that's invested in research and development versus a bunch of other things, including marketing. Let's take a look.
How about executive compensation, 2013 to 2018?
2013 to 2018, it's probably on average about $60 million a year.
Try 334 on for size. Now, how much did AbbVie spend on stock buybacks and stock buybacks and dividends to enrich your shareholders from 2013 to 2018?
Well, stock buybacks, if you actually look at just pure stock buybacks, it would be about $13 billion.
Stock buybacks and dividends is the question, sir.
Dividends, I'd have to come back with a number for that over that period of time.
$50 billion. So, Mr. Gonzalez, you're spending all this money to make sure you make money rather than spending money to invest in, develop drugs, and help patients with affordable life-saving drugs. You lie to patients when you charge them twice as much for an unimproved drug, and then you lie to policymakers when you tell us that R&D justifies those price increases.
Oh, it's one of my favorite exchanges between Katie Porter and one of these goons. So you see that small circle, that pink circle with R&D compared to the massive circle for stock buybacks. And it shows you what their priorities are. They're lying to you when they say, we need to price gouge you in order to develop other drugs. Look at that giant blue circle representing stock buybacks and dividends. And then over there at the very top, you see that small circle for research and development. I mean, it's just, we know what's really going on. They're robbing us.
So guys, you couldn't say, hey, look, they should be able to do dividends. They're a for-profit company, et cetera. But you don't get to say, hey, I need the $500 billion for research and development if you're not using it for research and development. So are you gonna make a promise right now that you're gonna take the entire $500 billion and put it in research and development? No, you're not gonna do that at all, are you? You don't have anywhere near that budget. And why are US taxpayers through NIH and so many other organizations actually doing the research? And then we never get compensated at all. Where's our $500 billion? This is plain robbery. Now let's talk about who's allowing the robbery. And that is the corrupt politicians, period. End of conversation. Okay, so if you're hearing anything else in mainstream media, they're just part of the kabuki theater that's meant to lie to you to protect the corrupt politicians.
Yeah, and I want to name some names because we know that the lobbying has an impact not just on Republican lawmakers, but Democratic lawmakers as well. I mean, as we know, Kyrsten Sinema in the Senate has taken nearly $1 billion from
Million.
I'm sorry, $1 million, my bad.
She hopes one day $1 billion.
$1 million, my bad, from the pharmaceutical companies, and she's of course vociferous in her opposition to the budget reconciliation bill. Well, there are other lawmakers that should be named. The details of the final legislation remain unclear, as The Hill reports, though particularly after 3 moderate House Democrats, Representatives Kurt Schrader of Oregon, Kathleen Rice of New York, and Scott Peters of California, said Tuesday that they would vote against HR 3 in the House Energy and Commerce Committee, and that they instead wanted a more scaled back measure. So some of the alternative proposals, it's just laughable. It's like, no, why don't we give Medicare the opportunity to negotiate like maybe 5 to 8 drug prices, but everything else is off limits.
No, it's
but why? But why? Why? Like, what's the justification of that? And they don't even feel like they need to give a justification.
No, guys, there's no ambiguity here at all. This proposal is favored by over 90% of Americans. That's a Kaiser poll. They're in the healthcare industry as well. So when you go to the Democrats that Anna just named, Schrader, Peters, and Rice, you say, well, now over 90% of the voters want it, and over 70% of Republicans want it, over 95% of Democrats want it. It makes no sense to sacrifice $500 billion for research we pay for anyway. And then in a worst case scenario, we'd get more than 97% of the drugs anyway. They have no answer for that. But the problem is the media barely ask them that question, and they certainly do not clarify why those congressmen are doing what they're doing. Here's the actual answer, and every one of you already knows it, because they are taking legalized bribes from drug industry and the healthcare industry overall. That's it. That is not 99% of the motivation. That is 100% of the motivation. And so if a reporter is not reporting that, they're not a real reporter. These Rice and Peters and Schrader are not going around going, what do you guys think? $500 billion or 2.5% of the drugs in a worst case scenario? We're having a debate. They're not having a debate. They're taking literal checks, literal legalized bribes, putting in their campaign, putting in as campaign contributions, let alone the fact that they're all corrupt and they're all gonna work for lobbyists anyway, which leads me to tell you that Senator Blanche Lincoln and Senator Mark Pryor, who were both Democrats in the Senate, conservative Democrats, but they claimed this was the one issue. Oh my God, I will tell you this, we have got to negotiate drug prices. Back when Bush and the Republicans were the ones that were saying don't negotiate, and Democrats were saying negotiate. Now they have become what? You're never gonna guess it. They've become incredibly wealthy lobbyists for the drug industry, and those 2 corporate Democratic goons are now going to lobby their fellow corporate Democratic friends at literal rooftop parties in Washington.
Yes.
And saying, oh, now remember everybody, remember how we're all corrupt? And they just pretend that we want to negotiate drug prices, and then you'll help me rob them, and then eventually one day you'll get rich like me. And their very presence at those parties is a signal to the people that are at those parties. One day you're also going to be obscenely wealthy if you play ball. By the way, who's at that party? Chris Coons, one of the worst corporate Democrats in the Senate and Joe Biden's best friend. These are facts. They might be uncomfortable facts, but they're facts. And also Jim Clyburn, one of the most corporate Democrats this country has ever seen.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. And Blanche Lincoln, by the way, she's created her own lobbying group that takes in $20,000 a month from pharmaceutical companies that she's representing. So it gives you a sense of where the priorities are. I guess when it comes to people in Congress, especially outgoing lawmakers, they've got a price, and they're gonna make a ton of money once their time in Congress is over, they're gonna take it.
Okay, I'm gonna say one last thing about this because how deep the corruption is. First of all, I don't want you to be mistaken. Republicans are not just as corrupt, they're more corrupt. 100% of the Republican Party is opposed to negotiating drug prices. Every single Republican in Congress wants higher drug prices for you, and don't you forget that. Just because the corporate Democrats are just as corrupt as the Republicans are, you shouldn't forget that the entire Republican Party is corrupt. And of course, former Republican goons like Senator John Kyle, Representative Tom Davis, also now drug company lobbyists telling their Republican friends, hey, we'll bribe you legally. And then they say, oh, of course, that's what the Republican Party's in business for. And finally, the staffers. So just because your staffer goes to work as a lobbyist doesn't mean that you're necessarily culpable, but you certainly shouldn't take meetings with them. So there's good people like Senator Elizabeth Warren, but her former health policy advisor, she has good policy positions. Her former advisors, lobbyists. No, it's easy, super easy. Senator Warren, you could be friends with her too. And by the way, she hasn't done anything wrong, okay? But if I'm my former advisor then becomes a lobbyist, I'll go play basketball with them, I'll go have beers with them, but they're banned from the office. And even when we're playing basketball, they're banned from talking to me because they have prostituted themselves for corporations. That's a fact. So I'm not interested, and in fact, I'll lose respect for you if you talk, so shut up about it and let's play ball. But I am not gonna ever have you in my office. Of course, former advisor to House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Dean Aghion, also a lobbyist, but really, take any advisors to almost all of these corporate politicians, and it's not the bug, it's the feature to become a lobbyist and get rich off of being corrupt while they were in office.
And finally, we got to show you what that ends up, doing to us as taxpayers. Not only do we get price gouged on these pharmaceutical drugs, remember we're talking about Medicare. This is the government providing the insurance, the care to seniors, right? So let's take a look at this last chart in the document. There we go. So bills for pills. So this was done by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and they show the United States relative to other developed countries in regard to how much spending per capita on drugs. Right, so the US spends far more compared to all those other countries. And that's what happens when there are literally regulations in place preventing the government from being able to negotiate for lower drug prices directly with these pharmaceutical companies.
And every one of those countries has better healthcare results than we do. So we pay way more and get way worse results. Why? Corruption, period.
We've got more on corruption when we come back from the break. You won't believe, or maybe you will believe, what Kyrsten Sinema is up to and where she traveled to do more fundraising. We'll be right back.
Back on the Turks during the social break here. Let's go to our members as always. Tina writes in, funny how vague the person in the commercial was on exactly what government would do to make accessing your meds would be, because there's nothing. Even Big Pharma couldn't make this dog hut. That's right, there's no provision at all in the bill to make it harder to access your drugs. Just 100% fiction. You're allowed to lie in political ads, ignore them. Especially if they're coming from giant companies, it's a near guarantee that they're lying to you. Waratah Dragon says, God, I love Katie Porter. She always brings the fire. Derek says it'd be great if this Katie Porter clip could play right after every one of Pharma's commercials. And that would be great, but we don't have an honest media in America. Megan Flynn says, when Katie Porter brings out her whiteboard, you know someone's gonna get embarrassed. Yeah, well, that's what we all look forward to. Now, let me make a quick note about Katie Porter. She is in probably the most purple district in California. And she was for Medicare for All, and she won anyway back in 2018 when a lot of progressives, including the Just Democrats, won. And then in 2020, when a lot of the coward corporate Democrats ran from progressive positions, they all lost. Katie Porter stuck strong and said, I said Medicare for All and I meant Medicare for All. She won, and fairly easily. You know what people like? They like uncorrupted politicians who are obviously honest and clean, and they like strength. And that's what Katie Porter has. If you actually want to win elections for Democrats, it's not a complicated formula. But that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to make as much money for themselves as possible. That's why you see that disconnect.
Yeah, I mean, I was led to believe that if you're a strong person who actually fights for the people and you happen to be in a purple district, you're gonna be voted out.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
As it turns out, no, you do better. Yet another, the billionth mainstream media lie in a row. Ed says Big Pharma is the poster child for no free market capitalism and corporate entitlement / welfare. That's a fact. And that's why, by the way, to be fair to the Republican voters, they totally agree with us on this. And they know it's not capitalism either. Lepton Soup 337 says CEOs seem to be fine sitting there while getting humiliated and crushed. Anyone else want to see Katie Porter put her boot on the necks of the big pharma? I'd pay for that action / donate to her campaign. Well, a lot of people have. It's the better way to go when you rely on the people. Peter Hamby with his haiku, medical money, a bitter pill to swallow, choosing wealth than life. And then Zoo writes in, Cenk, please don't eat that chip. I love spicy food and it put me down. That being said, I think it's time to make a Twitch, subscription, I guess. Guys, yes, I'm gonna eat a Pocky chip if we get to 6,600 subscribers on Twitch. I want it to be 7,000, we'll see.
I think they changed that.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. A quick clarification, I forced our team to cheat and it looks like it's stuck. They didn't even give me the news, I just heard from Anna. The Pocky Chip challenge that I'm willing to do on Twitch, we moved it to 7,000 subscribers. Yes, we moved it higher because I don't want to do it. At 6,200, Brett's gonna do it, Brooke's gonna do it, Jordan Yule's gonna take a deep dive with that terrible chip, and Adiana Vega, etc. And I particularly hate spicy food, but if we do get to 7,000, I'm a man of my word, of course I'll do it, okay? So thank you to all the wonderful people that are doing the subscriptions on Twitch, twitch.tv/TYT. All right, Anna.
Let's catch up with Sinema. Conservative Democratic Senator Kyrsten Sinema has decided to travel to Europe for some more fundraising. This time with American expats living in Europe. Now, her team didn't really want to share too many details about what was going on, but here's what we know. A spokesman for Sinema said that she had participated in fundraising for the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, but declined to say where or provide any additional details. One person briefed on the matter said the event had occurred in Paris. Now, there was another Democratic Democratic Party fundraiser in Europe as well. The chairman of the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, Senator Gary Peters of Michigan, is also in Europe this week and headlined a dinner on Wednesday in London with contribution levels as much as $36,500, and that's according to a copy of an invitation. Now, keep in mind, these are people in Europe, Americans living in Europe. I'm guessing they would have, less of an impact. They would experience less of an impact on these policies unless they're corporate executives or people who make a lot of money off of this rigged economic system.
So most of the people that are there are corporate executives that are at their French subsidiary or different subsidiaries in Europe. And so, because why bother going all the way to Paris and London? It's because there's tons of corporate executives in those European capitals. And so, but there's no question as to who's attending the fundraisers. Every single one of them is super wealthy. For most of these fundraisers, $1,000 is the bare minimum you can give. And what Anna is it up to? Yeah, $36,500 is the max you can give. So they're going to visit wealthy donors, which then of course, I mean, leads to the noting the, I don't know that it's the irony, and maybe it's perfectly appropriate for Kyrsten Sinema, but Sinema would not talk to a voter that was right next to her. But she'll fly all the way to Paris to talk to a wealthy donor.
100%.
Now, who do you think she's working for? Everyone that doesn't work in media knows that she's working for her donors.
So I'm gonna tell you how much money she's raised in a minute. But before I do, I also wanna talk a little bit about how the media has covered the disagreement within the Democratic Party in regard to the passage of the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. Now, I think that the corruption angle is the angle. It's the most important part of this story because you want to understand the motivations of the conservative Democratic lawmakers who are in opposition to passing the widely popular $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill. And so let's go to Don Lemon of CNN, who seems to be completely clueless in regard to the corruption angle. Let's watch.
But just 9 months later, too many Democrats are fighting each other instead of, I don't know, maybe getting something done. It all comes down to this. Democrats have to prove that they can get something done, and they have to do it before the midterms. But Democrats have to get real and figure out what their bottom line is. They need to get out of their own way. They need to push the president's agenda across the finish line without getting so bogged down in the details, in winning small little battles. The reality is they're not all going to get everything that they want. Progressives, you're not going to get everything that you want. But if you allow this moment to pass and not get anything accomplished, then you're gone. Then Joe Biden's gone, then the Democrats are gone, and then you won't have a chance. Same thing for conservative Democrats and the moderates. No one gets everything that they want. And they cannot let Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, two members of the president's own party, torpedo his agenda.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's why they pay him the big bucks. I mean, that in-depth analysis and commentary.
Yeah.
That's it? That's all you've got? Like, please get along. You guys need to get something passed. No, talk about motivations. Talk about the motivating factor behind the disagreement that we're seeing in Congress right now. But look, I feel like anytime the topic of corruption gets brought up on CNN, get off it, get off it, get off it, get off it. Like, I mean, it always happens. With the one exception of Dana Bash asking Joe Manchin about his corruption only because AOC called Manchin out on it. But other than that, CNN stays away from the corruption angle at any and all costs.
There was only one anchor that I've ever seen talk about it at length. It was Rick Sanchez, and he was fired based on theoretically other reasons a couple of weeks later. So look, when Ashley Banfield at MSNBC did an anti-Iraq war speech right before it began, they not only took her off air, but they moved her office into a closet. Why do they do that? To send a message to the rest of the anchors. You are not to ever talk about reality and the actual news. So what's the actual news here? That the Democrats are too wonky and they're bogged down on the details because they're all policy nerds and trying to get a little extra thing that's irrelevant? No, that's not the story at all. That doesn't just tell the story a little wrong. It misdirects you into the exact opposite narrative.
Bingo.
So the actual story is Sinema and Manchin are holding up the bill to get more donor money. And the Democrats don't need a single Republican vote. They don't need the parliamentarian. They could end the filibuster tomorrow. That's a fact, everybody knows that fact. They're choosing not to, and they say it's because of Senate tradition of protecting the beloved filibuster that was mainly used to block anti-lynching laws. Those are all facts. So they're saying the etiquette in the Senate is more important than all of our voters. Now that's absurd. Everybody knows that's absurd. Well, but to be fair, I honestly think Don Lemon doesn't know. I honestly think that most cable news anchors have no idea. They're paid actors, they're news actors, and their script was written for them. They read the script and they barely know the news. No, the Democrats are not negotiating with Republicans. They're also not negotiating with each other. They're negotiating with their own donors. Manchin and Sinema represent the donor class. And so, for example, when Sinema says, I don't want any of the healthcare provisions, she then gets checks from the healthcare industry. It's not complicated. If you think that those two things are not related, Sinema getting nearly $1 million and then making sure that that provision that she got paid for is no longer in the bill, and you think those two things are not connected, news is literally the last thing you should be doing.
Yeah, totally. No, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, the only checks and balances that Sinema cares about is the checks she's getting and the balance of her fundraising efforts, right? Like take a look at this. Sinema entered July with $3.5 million in her reelection account. Good luck with that, Sinema. Good luck with that. She's up for re-election in 2024. We're not gonna let people forget about what she's up to and what she's been doing recently.
I want to just real quick, Shane Goldmacher, I want to give him credit. That's the second time he covered money in politics for the New York Times. Almost never happens. So thank you for being on that beat and actually giving people real news.
Absolutely. I also want to go to someone who actually does understand the corruption angle because he's a longtime Democratic strategist. That's James Carville. He had his own commentary in regard to the reconciliation bill. Let's watch.
We're asked, Democrats in Congress are asked to do very popular things. All right, this doesn't take much courage to negotiate prescription drug prices. It doesn't take much courage to raise taxes on the wealthy. It doesn't take much courage to expand health care. It doesn't take much courage. Somebody's got to get in the room and say, okay, we wanted to do 10 things. We can do 5. Let's do these 5 and then take the other 5 and run them in 2022. You're not going to move any further than Joe Manchin or Kyrsten Sinema. So quit this idiotic protesting and hounding them and tell President Biden, get him in the room, get the speaker in there, get the majority leader. Let's hammer something out. And what we don't get, let's go for it in 2022.
Fascinating. So Manchin and Sinema are the ones who get to be the arbiters of what gets passed and what doesn't pass, right? So if progressives in the House do what Manchin and Sinema are doing, and mind you, the progressives aren't the ones that are taking massive checks from pharmaceutical companies, from the private health insurance industry. They're the ones who actually want to pass the policies, pass the agenda that Joe Biden wanted to pass. This is Biden's agenda. But no, I mean, we got to go with what the corrupt Democratic senators demand. They're the ones who get to be the arbiters. And Carville knows what's up. He knows what's up. He knows about the money, okay? Don Lemon might be a clueless cable news actor, but Carville knows about the money. And he, of course, is misdirecting, just like you mentioned, Cenk.
Okay, so a couple of quick things on Carville. So he's right, the Democrats did a terrible job of selling this bill. He's right that the bill is incredibly popular. So as I was listening to the interview, I'm like, so far so good. And the other day he said something that's true too. Maybe he's reformed, but then he ruins the whole thing by turning around at the end and going, and that's why we should do the least amount possible that Manchin and Sinema want. But wait a minute, if it's incredibly popular, why would we do the least amount? That doesn't make any sense. Why would we take out some of the most popular provisions? For example, they want the provisions about healthcare taken out, but those poll at 90%. By your own logic, James Carville, why wouldn't we do the AOC and Jayapal position instead of the Manchin and Sinema position? He would find that outrageous because he's like, hey, listen to progressives because they're incredibly popular and they represent our voters, and that's a fact based on the polling. No, that's an outrageous position. Of course, we should do what Manchin and Sinema want so we could all collect the checks. Oh, but you forgot to mention that part on television, James.
That was convenient.
Yeah, and by the way, did Ari, who I like as a person, a wonderful guy overall, but did Ari challenge him on that? No, because you're not allowed to challenge people on MSNBC. You're not allowed to talk about corruption. All of those so-called progressive anchors, let alone all the Republican anchors on there, do any of them talk about, guys, this is obvious. They're raising money and then they're taking out provisions. They voted against the minimum wage increase. They went to the National Restaurant Association, both Manchin and Sinema, and collected their checks. So did MSNBC anchors say, James Carville, are you insane? You know what the real deal is. You know what this is about. Why are you misleading our audience? No, zero. Why? Because they're on MSNBC, and that's not allowed in corporate media.
Well, let's switch gears a little bit. The Democrats have been in the hot seat, but let's move over to the far right with Bannon. So, Trump loyalist Steve Bannon has decided to completely ignore the subpoena by the January 6th panel that's investigating the Capitol riots that took place in January. And now he could face criminal charges. But don't get too excited. The criminal charges are actually pretty weak sauce, and I'll explain in a moment. But first, some context. So Bannon's lawyer on Wednesday of this week wrote a letter to the panel saying that his client, Steve Bannon, will not provide testimony or documents until the committee reaches an agreement with former President Donald Trump over executive privilege or a court weighs in on the matter. That is an issue between the committee and President Trump's counsel, and Mr. Bannon is not required to respond at this time, the attorney Robert Costello wrote. Now, this letter is also doubling down on what was communicated to the panel earlier. The letter doubled down on previous instances in which the former White House advisor made clear that he has no intention of appearing for a deposition Thursday, meaning today, as ordered by the committee, and essentially dared lawmakers to sue or hold him in criminal contempt earlier this month in response to the subpoena. So not only is he saying, I'm not gonna respond to this subpoena, I'm gonna completely ignore it. He's also basically telling them, go ahead, charge me with criminal contempt. Now, the panel is claiming that they plan on doing so. Obviously, I'm not like, the reason why I don't have like a strong reaction to it is because people like Steve Bannon get away with things all the time. And then when you look at the details in regard to that specific charge and what's likely to happen, it's pretty weak sauce. And people ignore the subpoenas and they do what they do because they think they're gonna get away with it. And my prediction is he probably will get away with it.
So, well, that's exceedingly likely already based on the direction the Democrats have gone. So there's a lot of theater, they're not actually gonna do anything. So let me explain the details. So, yeah, Steve Bannon is a right-wing white male, and they're generally speaking totally above the law in this country. But more so than that, if you're poor or you're middle class, you could still definitely get in trouble. But if you're among the elites, as Steve Bannon is, he was a very powerful person inside the White House, you know that there's no chance that other elites will ever put you in jail, because they'll be worried, oh my God, what if it's a precedent? And then one day when I ignore the law, because they have an understanding that the rich get to ignore the law. And the law is only for middle class and poor people. And so it's not for justice, it's for oppression. That's the point of it, okay? So in this case, what did Democrats do? They did criminal contempt. Well, that sounds pretty tough, right? That sounds worse than civil contempt. As the legal experts explain, it's actually not. If you put someone in criminal contempt, you're gonna go through appeals to Senate probably for about 3 years. Although this case is so easy, that might not be the case. So just real quick, let me do a diversion here on would he be guilty or not? Can you use executive privilege? If you're working for the president, sometimes you can use executive privilege. Hey, we were having a conversation about where we're gonna bomb Al-Qaeda. I cannot tell you in front of a House subcommittee about that conversation. There are legitimate reasons for it, right? And oftentimes it's abused. But in this case, he was fired from the White House in 2017.
Right.
This is for conversations that happened in 2020 and 2021. So that was 3-4 years ago. You have no claim for executive privilege. And the person who gives you executive privilege is the current executive, that's Joe Biden. So saying Donald Trump gave me executive privilege for something I did after I left the White House 3 years later is beyond absurd. That should be thrown out of court instantly, right? So it might not take all that time. But the Democrats are hoping it takes that long because they want the appearance of doing something without actually doing something. So what do the experts say is the difference? What could they do? Well, if they did civil contempt, it turns out that's actually much tougher. That means you go to jail now because you're in current contempt, and then the minute you're willing to testify, we let you out of jail. And that's how it works. Okay.
I mean, he's flaunting the fact that he's gonna get away with everything. Totally flaunting it. In fact, just recently in Virginia specifically, he was at a rally, the Save America Freedom Tour in Virginia. And he was essentially telling a cheering crowd that the 2020 election was stolen from Donald Trump. Let's watch.
That's why 3 November is so important. Number one, it has put the legitimacy of this regime in question to independents. Right? They're sitting there going, you know, something's not right. I think you're correct, right? Number one, that. Number two is to make sure that we get a fair accounting of what exactly happened. We can't go forward without it. Number three is to make sure they can't cheat us again. Number four is return Donald J. Trump to his rightful ownership of this presidency.
He's just gonna keep doing it because he can get away with it. And what I don't understand is, why are the Democrats treating him with kids' gloves? Like, what's the purpose?
No, I know exactly why. Because they're so afraid that if they hold anyone in the Trump administration accountable for the wild, outrageous law breaking, that if the Republicans get back in power, they're just gonna say, but I'm gonna tell you the problem with this line of thinking. They're just gonna say, oh, Pelosi did something wrong too. She's now in prison. But I got news for you. If Trump gets back into power, they're gonna do that anyway. He considered a military coup against America. He considered doing martial law and doing redoing the election last time. You think he's gonna hold a real election next time? You think he's gonna care about your stupid etiquette? You think he's gonna care about, oh no, I don't wanna be hypocritical, right? No, he's just gonna seize power, you idiots. And the way that fascists take over a democracy is when the opposition is too weak to simply enforce the law. Look, if you said to me, we're gonna arrest Steve Bannon based on his policy positions, I would fight you over it, okay? And there's no way I would agree to that. That's insane, that ruins the fiber of this country. So we would never tolerate that. But if the other side or our side says, I'm not gonna follow the law, I'm an elite, and I could break any law I like, and there's not a goddamn thing you could do about it. If you do not put that person in jail, you then say to everyone else, you're also allowed to break the law.
Yeah, in fact, it has emboldened others who have been subpoenaed. So I want to give you those examples. This is the last graphic. 3 other Trump allies also face subpoena deadlines this week. 2 of them, Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and former administration official, Kash Patel, have been engaging with the committee, according to the panel, though it remains unclear if that contact amounts to any form of cooperation. Patel is not expected to appear for his scheduled deposition with the committee.
No, this is insane. You're tolerating wild law breaking. Put them all in prison and say, you come here. And by the way, go through the legal process. I would never say to not go through the legal process. If they do an appeal, by God, do the appeal. Go through all the court cases you need to. We're not like the Trump right wing, where he says, what do we need judges for? No, we need judges because that's how a democracy functions. So go through the right process, but don't be afraid to go through the right process because you're afraid of fascists. So that's how they went. Last thing, if you notice in that little speech that Bannon gave, what's the first reason he said to keep lying? He didn't say lie, as you saw on the tape, but they're lying about the elections, and Bannon knows it. Of course Bannon knows it. Bannon is one of the smart ones. He knows exactly that they're lying. He said, well, basically we've manufactured doubt with independence. Mission accomplished. That's what the tobacco companies did. That's what the oil companies are doing. They manufacture doubt. Now there's doubt as to whether Biden won in some small percentage of independents, but that's the small percentage they need to win elections. So they did it on purpose and it worked because the other side is too weak to fight back.
Yep.
And then finally he said, return Donald Trump to his rightful ownership of the presidency. Ownership. Because Bannon knows they're not gonna win in democracy anymore. They're not gonna win elections. The demographics have changed. Forget the minorities, blacks, browns, they're distracting you with that. Younger voters are so progressive. Luntz knows it, Bannon knows it. They know they have no prayer going forward. So they're now saying that democracy is not about voting in elections, it's about ownership of the White House. And if you ever lose an election, never concede defeat, lie about it till the end of time, manufacture doubt, and then seize power. Because this isn't about America and our system of government. It's the exact opposite. It's to seize power and do what they want to do culturally, which is white supremacy. They think Steve Bannon has said it 1,000 times. He said it so many times. Trump even once disagreed. Okay?
Yeah, and it goes further than that. I mean, you think that we're experiencing crony capitalism now. I mean, they love hoarding the resources for themselves. I mean, we saw that so much during the Trump administration, where he used the office of the presidency to enrich himself, to help his children enrich themselves. I mean, Bannon loves it. Bannon wants that. It goes, yes, there's definitely the white nationalism angle, but while they're also spewing populist rhetoric, they want to further rig the economic system in their favor. That's what's really going on.
100%.
All right, we got to take a break, and when we come back, Donald Trump is actually discouraging Republican voters from voting. That's fun. We'll tell you why when we come back.
All right, don't forget tonight, right after the main show, we got Power Hour with Nina Turner. We're gonna tackle a really hard one. So what do we do with all this pharma spending? Obviously, Nina had a lot of money spent against her in her campaign. Me likewise. How do we grapple with that? How do we get the Democratic Party to actually care about their voters instead of worrying about all those ads that Big Pharma is gonna run? So check that out tonight. That's just for members, tyt.com/join. And that is at 8 o'clock Eastern. All right, let's go to Twitch here. El Estois gave 650 bits. That it makes a huge difference. Thank you. Sergeant Adequate gifted a sub. Metal Turtle gifted 5 subs. Meme Ball sub subscribe for 6 months in advance. Okay, these are all lovely things. We appreciate it. We get to 6,200 subscriptions. A number of the TYT hosts, staff, etc., are going to take the Pocky Challenge. That's the incredibly disgusting spicy chip that we're going to be forced to eat. And at 7,000, I'm going to do it. Okay. Centaur Dragon says 5 months in and still don't know if Cenk's book comes with Too Strong Coffee. I'll have to buy it to find out, I guess. Well, you guys are wonderful for giving me softballs to plug things. The book is almost done. So now it's a little bit more real that justice is coming. Book.com, you could pre-order there, justicecomingbook.com. Too Strong Coffee right here, always have it. That's why I'm so pumped up oftentimes. Gives money to progressive causes, has new brands, new flavors, new bags, like 2-pound bags, smaller bag, etc. Check it out at twostrongcoffee.com/TYT. You gotta put the /TYT in there so TYT gets the credit. Kruger like Freddie says, thanks for being a consistent corner for me to return to. Love the work that you do, keep it up. Likewise, brother. Aussie Plant Herman says, can't believe it's been 8 months. Love all your work, I've learned so much. I now have the vocabulary and the receipts to argue progressive politics at home. I love to hear that. It's music to our ears. Stuck in phone wrote, and love what you all do. You can keep taking all those Bezos bucks. You know you can get it for free with Jeff Bezos' money if you go to tyt.com/prime. Mayhem Mendez says, my 1-year anniversary since I figured out how to subscribe with Prime. Love from Amsterdam. See, there you go, boom, they did it. It takes about 30 seconds. You learn how at tyt.com/prime. Ray Turner, AKA the Bearded Dragon, says on Super Chat, Bannon isn't immune from prosecution. He's not Prince Andrew, for goodness sake. He's just some guy. It's because the Democrats are afraid. This Democratic leadership is so sad. HXC Mike says the like to dislike ratio shows that our generation sees through pharma, but this ad is likely to air on cable news where its viewers don't get comments or, by the way, the news. We'll be back. back on TYT. Jen and Anna with you guys. Anna's got the news.
Donald Trump is discouraging Republican voters from voting unless he gets something very specific that he demands. He says if we don't solve the presidential election fraud of 2020, which we have thoroughly and conclusively documented, no they haven't, Republicans will not be voting in 2022 and 2024. It is the single most important thing for Republicans to do. This was a statement that he recently released. By the way, while Trump claimed that he won the states of Arizona, Georgia, and Pennsylvania at a rally in Iowa just this past Saturday, Biden actually won each of those states. That's from a report, by the way, from National Review, which is not in any way a liberal outlet. It is a conservative outlet. So Trump also claimed, by the way, that he has never conceded in the 2020 election. The former president also compared his actions to Hillary Clinton in 2016, saying, quote, here's the difference, Hillary Clinton conceded, I never conceded, no reason to concede, except he's on tape conceding. Let's watch.
Now Congress has certified the results. A new administration will be inaugurated on January 20th. My focus now turns to ensuring a smooth, orderly, and seamless transition of power. This moment calls for healing and reconciliation.
Sounds like a concession to me.
Yeah, and by the way, it's funny because the right-wing often says, oh, what's the difference that Trump and us never gave up and we keep saying he won despite the fact that he didn't. Hillary did the same thing with the Russia. Well, Trump just said she didn't do the same thing, she conceded.
Consistency doesn't matter. Consistency does not matter at all. The video evidence that I just showed you of Donald Trump conceding doesn't matter at all. I'm specifically referring to Trump's avid supporters. The evidence doesn't matter, none of it matters to them. What matters is that they support Trump at any and all costs, and we're seeing that right now.
Right, last thing on that small note, that some people who consider themselves on the left, but actually are not, also make similar points. Like, oh, Hillary never conceded, because of Russiagate. That's not true, that's not even close to true. She whined about 1,000 different reasons why she lost, none of which was true. She lost because she was a terrible candidate who was an establishment figure when the country hates establishment. The excuses are true, but she conceded. She didn't go around saying, oh no, I won. She didn't sue, she didn't go to 60 court cases, she didn't lose the 60 court cases, she didn't ask for audits after the court cases.
Right, there were no audits.
Yeah, she didn't go to Mar-a-Lago and whine every day, I think I won. That's your bitch, Donald Trump. And if you're on the left and he's your boy, you're not on the left. I got news for you. Oh no, don't talk about Trump. Don't talk about Trump. Trump derangement syndrome. We love Trump. I mean, we ignore Trump. Shut up and go be a right winger. Okay, so now back to the main point here. He is discouraging the voting. Well, that's a disaster for the Republican Party, and I love to see it. So now, if he keeps this up, this is putting like crybaby syndrome on nuclear level. So now what are they gonna do? He cost them the Georgia Senate seats. That's almost, I mean, based on the data, it is overwhelmingly clear. Counties that he won, Republicans did not show up at the same rate that they showed up for him. Democrats did. He suppressed his own vote, and the Republicans lost the Senate. And that's why Democrats might pass a bill here and there, right? And so now he's threatening to do it again. Well, that puts him on a collision course with other Republicans. Because it's one thing to kiss his ass when there isn't much of a downside for you, it's just a downside of democracy and decency. Right. But when it affects you and your elections, and he's telling everybody to come to not show up to vote for you, well, now you're on a collision course. Because you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. If you say, hey, Trump is right, don't vote for me, you're damned. If you say Trump is wrong, oh my God, he don't like me, everybody attack him. And his dumbass followers will rip you apart. So congratulations, there's your Frankenstein, you go deal with it.
Well, what's interesting is how many Republicans, including those in the business community, and I know this based on conversations I had when I was doing the debate with Ben Shapiro, like they despise Trump, but they're terrified to say it publicly because the supporter base is real. But in terms of the business community, in terms of the Republican members of Congress, they don't like Trump, but they have to pander to Trump's base because Trump's base is a significant portion of the Republican electorate, right? So you're right, they find themselves in a difficult spot. However, there are some Republicans who are willing to speak out. So I wanna go to this fun, I guess, campaign that's taking place right now with a Republican organization. They're putting up these massive billboards in various parts of the country. Here's an example. This one was put up in Times Square, and it's the Republicans for Voting Rights. They launched a billboard campaign across the country in response to reckless Republican calls for sham audits of the 2020 election. Here's one we've put up in New York City's Times Square, they write. And then the group also said it plans to put up dozens of billboards in 8 states, many near state capitol buildings and in locations where Trump supporters are pushing for audits, including Georgia, Florida, Texas, Pennsylvania, Arizona, and Michigan. And so here's an example of one of the billboards that they also put up. And it, I really do appreciate the photo that they used.
Yeah,
it's a good photo.
Yeah, definitely. So the only thing that might keep Trump from running again and perhaps completely obliterating democracy is what Michael Cohen said, which is if he lost twice, he just, his ego could not handle it. It would implode. It's already imploded. Imagine he loses again. He's definitely gonna call for violence. Definitely. You could write it down in stone. I will eat whatever shorts you need me to eat if Donald Trump runs and loses again and doesn't call for violence. Okay, so, and by the way, right now, is he gonna run again? I don't know what you guys are talking, again, Cohen's theory is the only hope. Right now, he's quadrupling the next closest Republican within the primaries. Donald Trump is 100% in charge of the Republican Party. Chuck Grassley, who said he was extreme and irresponsible and unconstitutional after January 6th. Oh, Dean of Republicans, principled conservative, been around for decades. When kissed Trump's ass the other day, took his endorsement. He said, what do you want me to do? Not take his endorsement? He said 91% of my voters love him. So my principles, I crumpled them up, I threw them in the garbage, and then I threw that in the toilet and I flushed it. That's what the state of the Republican Party. So what are you guys gonna do now? What are you gonna do? And by the way, those billboards, yes, I love them, but don't get it wrong. The press will report that as principled ex-Republicans, and they are, or current Republicans, but that don't agree with Trump. But it's not just principles. That billboard in Times Square cost $1 gajillion. It's moneyed interest. Okay, they're doing the right thing. They're doing the right thing in this case, but it's likely corporate donors who think, well, I like X, Y, and Z, right?
I like the tax cuts, but I don't like the disinformation about the vaccines because I want my slaves back at work. I want them vaccinated. I want the economy going again. That's honestly what's going on here, right? But they're too afraid to say it publicly, so they fund these campaigns to put these types of billboards out there.
Exactly, so all of these politicians are now going to be faced with a choice. And they can't win with either side. Either they're gonna follow Trump into oblivion and say, don't vote for us, which is unbelievable.
I'm here for it.
Right, or they're gonna try to oppose Donald Trump and Trump is gonna crush them. And then Frankenstein's minions will be like, yes, they will love that blood sport. And have at it, Hoss, rip your own party apart. I can't wait. And by the way, there is a silver lining in that. If they rip each other to shreds and the corporate Republicans get exposed, we're trying to expose our own corporate Democrats on our side. If you guys expose your corporate Republicans, then there'll be an upside to this insanity that's going on right now in the Republican Party.
All right, that does it for our first hour. We're gonna take a brief break, but when we come back, Sanjay Gupta of CNN goes on Joe Rogan's podcast in an attempt to debunk some of the theories, some of the thoughts about the coronavirus. Did he do a good job?
No.
We'll see. We'll be right back.
You're about to watch some behind the scenes footage of the Young Turks. Ooh. Now these are partial videos. If you want to get all of them, you become a member, go to tyt.com/join, and you'll get all the behind the scenes of me, Anna, John, JR, a little bit reality show like, tyt.com/join, and enjoy this.
You know what you're seeing behind me? Jersey, hold. Watch me flip this camera. However I flip it. Do I flip it like this?
No, I just took a picture. I'm bitzing right now.
What?
Behind the scenes.
Oh, okay. For members? I don't have my face on.
She doesn't have her face on, folks. Oh, that's JR's ass right there.
You can't take 5 minutes off, can you?
No, I can't, Johnny Pie. I said it was live stream, but I was lying. It's not a live stream. It's just for members. Bitsy, this is my cat. You know what his name is? Kiki Cat.
Animals are innocent.
Control room and the insanity is obviously there.
Right now, as you can see, I'm directing or tech directing.
I'm so happy to be here.
This is what like a Labor Day beard looks like for Jank. Man, you're a Young Turks viewer if you recognize me like this.
Oh, thank you. You are the one person in my life I would love to meet.
What's going on, guys? This is a Bitsy or a BTS or behind the scenes with Hassan Piker, aka Woke Bay.
Oh, hi. I didn't see you there.
I have finished my show, The Damage Report, and now I get into a really awkward time of the day.
When I'm sitting, the control room is right there. So I can see Bart.
And this is the Pittsburgh office, by the way. Referred to often as the boiler room.
You see how it's ripped? Is it super unprofessional to wear that at a business meeting? Or am I like cool rebel?
I just finished doing the power panel and I'm fired up.
What do you do for TYT?
Not a whole lot.
If you're frantically tweeting at us that something's broken, thank you, because I'm fixing it.
And thank you for being a TYT member.
Super last thing, because there's always got to be a super last thing. Oh, that was disastrous. This has been behind the scenes, behind the scenes.
Welcome to Indisputable. I'm your host, Dr. Rashad Richard. We got a lot happening today. But what do we do on this show? We tell the truth. You know why we tell the truth? Because the truth is simply indisputable.
Rashad, great to be here. Congratulations on the new show. And I gotta let everybody know that Rashad and I go way back.
Here's the pattern that we see in all of these Karen stories. They think they own stuff they do not own. Now, where does that come from? I don't know, maybe slavery. Maybe they think they should still own black people.
This is what happens when Karens weaponize the police.
When you're used to privilege, equality seems like oppression.
It hits you in a certain way when someone is holding you against your will, treating you like you're a criminal and you're an innocent person. This is something that black people face no matter where they are.
A stronger black economy lends itself to a stronger, greater economy. Don't think it's exclusive of you, it's inclusive of you.
What's your beef with critical race theory?
It adds more fuel to the fire of the racist tendencies that we already have.
We have a generation of problem solvers that can remedy the problem if they are properly taught what the problem is.
You know who created redlining in this country? The white liberal.
I don't give a damn who created it. If it's a racist policy, Shelley, here's what I don't know. I don't know. See, there you go filibustering, brother. You're scared of this truth, but you're gonna get it though.
Climate is changing fundamentally, extremely, and non-linearly. It's becoming worse now. It's not when the levees burst that is the problem. It's in the anticipation of that.
So I hope every human being is safe. And by human beings, I do not include multinational corporations, especially the ones that started climate change in the first place.
What we're currently doing right now in cutting emissions is clearly not enough. There will be ramifications to what Trump is doing. I don't want people to suffer, but I feel like there's gonna be a lot of suffering because we have an imbecile as our leader.
I can't believe this. Weightlessness. Oh my goodness me.
All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. So a lot more to get to, but this next story's got me worked up. So Casper, take it away.
All right, so Joe Rogan had a lengthy 3-hour-long conversation with CNN's Sanjay Gupta about coronavirus. And it did get tense at times. In fact, we're gonna show you one clip that demonstrates just how tense it got. But I did listen to the full podcast because I wanted to make sure I really understood how that conversation went. So we'll talk about the entirety of the conversation. But first, here's Joe Rogan confronting Gupta about the whole ivermectin horse dewormer stuff. Let's watch.
All
All right, hang on. The thing is, we're like going so fast. Like I feel like I'm missing.
Do you think that's a problem that your news network lies?
Well, I don't.
Dude,
what did they say?
They lied and said I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
they
with
shouldn't have said it was
bunch of other medications.
If you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication for parasitic disease. And as you say, it's probably, I think, 250 million people have taken it around the world?
More,
I get that.
Way more.
So,
way more. Billions of people have taken it.
Can I just come back to the one I want to talk about? Two things on the ledger.
Before we get to that, does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before coming on your podcast.
But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
They did. I watched.
Gupta was kind of a disaster throughout that entire podcast. I have many thoughts, but Cenk, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so look, first of all, does CNN lie? Is Rogan right about that? Yeah, of course. And so I've given you many policy examples. The classic one is they'll say that Jake Tapper's favorite move in the world is say Medicare for all costs 3.2 trillion and leaves out that it saves 3.4 trillion. Well, that's a pretty relevant fact. So that's lying by omission. So that's policy issues. Then on a personal level, CNN has lied about me. They wrote an article claiming that I was sexist and racist, filled with lies, filled to the rim with lies. Cenk is anti-Muslim. I'm born Muslim, my family's Muslim. My mom is Muslim. The idea that I'm anti-Muslim is insane. They just lied about it, didn't bother fact checking, didn't bother doing anything. And there was a half dozen other lies about it, about me. So I'm not a mainstream media guy who's like, oh, how can you say CNN lies? No, of course they do, I know that, right? By the way, you know who else lies? Joe Rogan and his hosts, all the time. I mean, and his guests. They've lied about me many times. He's had tons of guests who come on and say things that aren't remotely true. Dave Rubin went on there and told about half a dozen lies himself. Outrageous lies that never happened. Did Joe Rogan ever push back on that? No, he doesn't mind, as long as people are lying about people that aren't his friends, right? Or him. When somebody's lying about him, he's like, oh, he's all aghast, right? Somebody lies about me on his show, he loves it, he's there for it. So hey, spare me your BS outrage, okay? So now let's go to the core issue that they're talking about. So Gupta went on there for what? Like to theoretically address Rogan's audience so they get vaccinated and he gets them some information. Well then, brother, you gotta be prepared.
Totally.
You got ambushed in the most classic conservative way and you had no idea. So what's part of the ambush? The ambush is that they're not gonna listen to the whole 3 hours. They're gonna take it out a 2-minute clip, and then every headline is gonna say that you got owned by Joe Rogan and Joe Rogan destroyed you and Joe Rogan did this and this. And he proved that ivermectin, that CNN lied about ivermectin. And what is the impression that's going to leave everybody with? That ivermectin is effective against coronavirus, which is totally untrue. It's 100% untrue. Now, you think, well, I mean, later I kind of corrected that, I tried to correct it a little bit by debunking some of the studies, and to be fair to Gupta, he did, okay? But you've got to counteract that on the spot, and you gotta not go in there unprepared and not know that Joe's gonna ask you that question. He's been railing about that the whole time. You gotta do a little research. So, but the thing is, people who are in mainstream media, they're obsessed with fame and celebrity. So now Joe is famous, so he's super friendly, super friendly. If he was asked that same thing from someone he thought was not credible, right or left, Gupta would have been totally dismissive, right? But he's in front of a celebrity with lots of audience, so all of a sudden he's like, I mean, okay, all right. No, wait a minute. You got to say at that moment, Joe, what the hell are you talking about? Yes, it's for horses, yes, it's for humans, but it has nothing to do with coronavirus, and you're leading people to believe that it does, and when you do, they don't take the vaccine. You're making it seem like it's a replacement for the vaccine. They don't get vaccinated, and then a huge percentage of them die. They die, Joe. They die because they listened to you and thought ivermectin was for coronavirus treatment, when it isn't. It's for tapeworm. Joe, admit it. Is it for tapeworm? Is it for tapeworm? Is it for tapeworm? Admit it, Joe. But he's not ready to do that because he's having fun with a celebrity. Well, you're doing damage to the country by going in like that.
So by listening to all of it, the sense that I got was, number one, Sanjay Gupta is clearly a fan of Joe Rogan's podcast because he listens to it regularly. He made several references to previous episodes of the podcast, including references to pretty obscure guests. And I was like, oh, he's not BSing. He actually does, in fact, listen to Joe Rogan's podcast regularly. And the other thing that I kind of felt was that he wanted to go on the podcast in an effort to calmly debunk some of the misinformation on Rogan's podcast, but he didn't come. He just didn't seem prepared, to be honest with you. And look, I think that Joe Rogan actually asked some pretty interesting questions. Like, there were things that I learned through that podcast that I haven't really seen covered, that I want to do more research on. And it's okay to ask those questions, right? Joe Rogan's not a doctor and he's not a medical professional or expert. So it's okay to have those questions, it's okay to ask them, but it's really discouraging when the person answering those questions doesn't really seem ready to answer them.
Yeah.
Right, in fact, some of Sanjay Gupta's responses to Rogan made me question, I'll give you a specific example and let me just be clear about something. I'm not a health professional, I'm not a medical professional. This is just my opinion based on the exchange that they had during this podcast, okay? So what I'm about to say should have no bearing on what your personal decision should be. Please talk to a doctor. With that said, there was an exchange regarding whether or not children should get vaccinated. And so there's a study indicating that some number of young boys who got vaccinated experienced inflammation of the heart, right? Which, by the way, is an outpatient treatment, right? You get a steroid and you're fine, but I didn't know about that. And so the question is, when you do a cost-benefit analysis, is it worth getting kids vaccinated knowing that there's this kind of side effect? Are there long-term studies or studies looking at the long-term effects of the vaccine on children? Those are valid questions. And to be honest with you, Gupta did such a poor job responding to those questions that it had me wondering if it's a good idea to vaccinate kids. So again, I think that he actually did more harm than anything else in that whole podcast.
Yeah, so guys, I know the right wing lies about us, and so you're not gonna believe it when I say we're not partisan. But here, let me try to prove it to you, okay? So are we progressive? Hell yes, okay? But we're not for the Democratic Party. I'm not interested in their stupid politics. And so, there was a moment when coronavirus was clearing up and people were still insisting, and Democrats were, whether it's for political reasons or not, or maybe they didn't understand the science, that you have to wear a mask outdoors even if you're well, past 6 feet away from other human beings. Well, there was almost no cases left in LA at the time, and we're outside and we're nowhere near 6 feet. It doesn't make any sense to wear a mask. That's not what the scientists say. I care about the science, right? I don't need to oppress you with a mask. I don't like masks. I only wear them because dumbass Rogan fans won't get vaccinated, so we still have the coronavirus around. So that it's their goddamn fault that we all have to wear a mask. So anyways, and on the kids issue, kids get a lot less sick. I've said that on the show from literally day one. I said, look guys, don't panic, at least kids don't get as bad a cases, they're less likely to get it, etc., right? But they can pass it on to adults, no question about that. And that's what we're mainly worried about in the schools, okay? Now, but none of that is the main issue. The main issue is that there's a giant percentage in this country that are not taking the vaccine, which is by far and away the most effective way to fight against coronavirus. And if you don't look, there's 10 times as many people that are dying because they're unvaccinated than the vaccinated people who got it again, okay, or who got it for the first time. At least 10 times as much. That's a stone cold fact that leads to people dying. And you cannot use ivermectin as a replacement. It is not meant for that. It is meant for parasites and worms, both in horses and humans. Oh, saying, humans can take it. Doesn't mean anything. Humans can take Advil, but it doesn't cure cancer. Come on, guys, that's so, yes, I'm gonna say it. That's dumb. You're a dumb person if you think Advil can cure cancer. It can't. Oh, well, you know, humans also take it. Doesn't mean a goddamn thing. They take it for what? They take it for what? They take it for tapeworm, you morons. They don't take it for coronavirus. We're trying to save your lives. We're trying to save your lives. And I know you don't want, I want freedom. I want to die for no goddamn reason because I listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. That's how you take on Joe Rogan. Not a go, well, with Joe Rogan, he's a celebrity, I listen to his podcast. Oh, okay, Joe, you're right. CNN lied about ivermectin. I won't give you the context though. Oh, God damn it, you did more harm than good. By the way, one last thing about Joe. You know, he used to do an interesting podcast. Now, wall-to-wall right-wingers, if he ever brings on a left-winger, with the exception of Bernie, they must kiss his ass. When's the last time anybody ever challenged him on his own show? Oh, it's now fans will be like, oh no, back in December, somebody once said something that he slightly disagreed with. Yeah. It's a super boring Bill Maher-like show now, where they're all in a high-five agreement. Oh, right-wing's right about everything, right-wing's right about everything. Oh, they're the real populists. It's a super uninteresting show. So now I'm sick of the fawning coverage. What did Joe Rogan say today? Which then leads to a giant wall of misinformation. Joe, ironically, you become the thing that you despise in the first place. Now you're spreading more disinformation than the mainstream media is. Congratulations.
All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about establishment media figures who knowingly spread misinformation or withhold information from their audiences and readers. So when we come back, we'll talk about Katie Couric and the favor she did for the late RBG. We'll be right back.
I thought this was about coronavirus, and I was just mad, and I thought we were ready for a serious thing. And on Super Chat, it's Matt Gates on a white Ford Bronco rode in. I'm a healthcare worker and cared for a teen I was sure had overdosed. Diarrhea, disoriented, the shakes. Turns out he ate one of those spicy chips, then drank 3 Mountain Dews. Hint, drink milk. Now you got me more worried about it. Here I am telling people to do the healthy thing, and now I'm doing this Pocky challenge thing for Twitch. Our channel on Twitch, twitch.tv/TYT. If we get to 7,000 subscribers, I'm apparently at risk of all of these different things. So congratulations to me, but I will not be drinking Mountain Dew on top. So thank you for at least bringing me that information. Elizabeth Jacob writes in, don't you think that if the Republicans don't vote, it would lead to a major uprising, more so than what they succeeded in doing on January 6th? Kind of scary. Every day, conservative media drives right-wingers towards violence. That is, if we do not fight back effectively against it, it is going to become inevitable. Democratic leadership are the weakest people I've ever seen in my life. The chance of them fighting back against it effectively is near zero. So you do the math on that one. But these Republicans, the minute they don't win an election, yes, they're gonna get violent. You could bet your bottom dollar on it. I would be shocked if there was not violence after they lose an election. All right, Kev C 24/7 says, okay, next time I get a ticket, refuse to go to court unless they reach an agreement with Obama. That's basically what Bannon is doing. Oh, but if you're not among the elites, you don't get to pull that off. Bannon is a criminal. He was brought up on felony charges of fraud based on the wall. And he was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna build a wall. Wait, give me money. And they just put it in his pocket. And they charged him with some very serious felonies. And Trump's like, oh, that's my criminal. That's my boy. So he pardoned him. And Bannon now rightfully thinks, I'm above the law. Trump pardons me. Democrats are the weakest people I've ever seen. I spit in their face and they don't do anything about it. So that's the state we're in. All right, guest says, can Sinema and Manchin get kicked from the party? Not yet, not yet. We do need their votes. If you kick them out now, that's a disaster. Later we'll see how the chips fall. That's what primaries for. That's normal politics. Moondragon said you should change your stock footage of Sinema and Manchin to pictures of them dodging cameras and questions. Well, that would be a more accurate representation of them, especially Kyrsten Sinema. We'll be back. All right, back on TYT, Jake Huger, Anna Kasparian with you guys. Anna's got news.
In a new book, Katie Couric admits that she previously chose to not report some of the comments that the late Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg had made in regard to Colin Kaepernick. So in her book titled Going There, Couric reportedly writes that she was conflicted after Ruth Bader Ginsburg, during a 2016 interview, had criticized Colin Kaepernick and other athletes who protested racial justice that year. Racial injustice that year. Couric made the decision to cut the justice's comments from the final piece she wrote for Yahoo News. And here's what Ginsburg had said during that interview. Couric wrote that Ginsburg said that the protest showed contempt for a government that has made it possible for their parents and grandparents to live a decent life, which they probably could not have lived in the places they came from. As they became older, they realized that this was youthful folly. Couric quoted Ginsburg as saying, and that's why education is important. Look, it's not, especially someone who's a journalist, right? Katie Couric is supposed to be a straight news journalist. It's not her job to provide cover for anyone, including people we like. Obviously, we were very supportive of Supreme Court Justice Ginsburg, but nonetheless, a journalist shouldn't withhold information from the public.
Yeah, so it could have led to a more wholesome conversation about it. I don't mean as in clean, I mean as in fuller. And that was in the height of the Kaepernick controversy. And would it have been taken by the right wing and celebrated? Yes. And would it have created a controversy? Yes. Would it have hurt Ruth Bader Ginsburg's reputation? Yes. She says she didn't want to do it because of that reason. Well, you put it in your book.
Yeah, seriously, like I don't really understand.
So apparently when you're gonna make good money from it, it's okay to hurt RBG's reputation.
Yeah.
But when you were just doing an interview, it wasn't okay. So that's not good journalism. That's obvious. We don't have to discuss that any further. In terms of RBG's opinion, look, it's misinformed. Just because you agree with somebody overall or you've liked them in the past doesn't mean you have to agree with everything they say now, Dave Chappelle. I like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I didn't agree with all of her decisions. It's not mandatory. You don't have to think like the partisans in Washington. You're allowed to be a human being who disagrees with folks at different times. I don't know if it was because she was older that she made what I think is a mistake, or some people could have talked her out of it.
She had admitted later that she was not informed. In fact, let me get to that graphic now. Days after that 2016 interview, Ginsburg walked back her comments, saying in a statement that she had been barely aware of the protests or their purpose, and that her comments were inappropriately dismissive and harsh, and she should not have, or she should have declined to respond. So she weighed in on something that she wasn't fully aware or informed about. She realized that, walked the comments back. And look, my takeaway from all of it, well, two takeaways. Number one, I've already expressed. Journalists are not supposed to do activism or provide cover for figures they like, right? That's not Katie Couric's job. Katie Couric's job as a journalist is to share with the audience what she has gathered in her research, in the interviews that she's doing, and she did the opposite in this regard, and that was really bad judgment. The other takeaway is, and I hope that people can start thinking this way in regard to everyone, there's no such thing as like a pure, perfect person. Everyone, okay, the people you love the most are flawed human beings. Humans are flawed. Sometimes they have great takes, sometimes they do great things, sometimes they do awful things and they think awful things. And that's fine, that's part of being a human. We're like in this culture right now where someone messes up, right? Inevitably, we all mess up, and then all of a sudden it's like, this is the worst person in the world, now they're bad. Like, let's stop having this childish black and white thinking on others. Let's give people a little more space. Let's be a little more compassionate and understanding. And this isn't just about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. This is about everyone, right? I hate that black and white thinking.
Yeah, so first last thing on Ginsburg, then I want to go back to the point you just made. Look, she's a great historic figure overall. And she's totally wrong about this initially. Look, when they put out those comments about what she really thinks later, even after the interview, people from the court called Couric from Ginsburg's team and asked her, don't put that in, because they knew it was bad. So they're doing damage control. So I don't know what Ruth Bader Ginsburg actually thought and what her people realized she should think publicly. Okay, I'm gonna keep it real on that too. And if she thought that it was the right thing to say, she's dead wrong. She said, which they probably could not have lived in places they came from, that Anna read you, right? Well, no, wait, you're talking about yourself. So maybe your parents and grandparents came from Eastern Europe or somewhere along those lines, and they might not have had the same freedoms under the Soviet Union, for example, or under the Nazis, obviously, right? But Colin Kaepernick's parents didn't come from there. And if you're black in this country, your parents, grandparents, and all the way down to your ancestors, obviously not your parents and grandparents, but your ancestors were brought here. And they were brought here in chains. So it's apples and oranges, and so that comment makes no sense. And protesting against police abuse of black Americans is the most American thing you could do. Freedom of speech about a worthy cause. And I think anyone who says they should not do that is at best ignorant. And I don't care that it's Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is otherwise great on issues. And so finally on Anna's point about nobody's perfect. Look, I'm so flawed. I changed my mind a great number of times. That means I disagree with my earlier position. My earlier position was wrong. I'd like to think that I had the courage to change it, instead of being so worried about my ego and insecurities that I was like, no, I'm always right because I'm a big guy and I'm important. No, when I'm wrong, I say it. It's not that hard. But people like Dave Chappelle, I think he's an incredible comedian, and we talked about it on the show the other day. And you don't have to hate him to say he's wrong on the trans issue, okay? And just because you thought he was great in the past doesn't mean you have to agree with him on the trans issue and go, oh, okay, then don't question him. Don't question him. If you question him, it's canceling him. No, he's totally wrong on the trans issue, 100% wrong. That doesn't mean I hate him. That doesn't mean he needs to be fired, but it does mean he's wrong. So please use your own judgment and don't fall into camps of, I'm either pro Dave Chappelle or I'm anti Dave Chappelle. And by the way, the minute Dave Chappelle says something about racism, all those right wingers who are claiming to be fans of his will immediately turn around and go, now I'm in the camp of I hate Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, people are just a lot more complicated than that. And it is what it is. That's just the lazy thinking that I'm seeing all over the place. It's sad. Anyway, let's move on to more lazy thinking. Lauren Boebert. There has been a tragic and brutal attack in Norway where a man killed 5 people using a bow and arrow. Now, the right wing in America, though, has decided to use this tragic case to push out their thoughts on gun regulations. Of course, here in the United States, we have incredibly lax gun regulations, whereas Norway has stricter gun regulations. And so Lauren Boebert wanted to make a point about how maybe Norway should take a page out of our book. Obviously, we disagree, but first, before I get to those details, let me give you some more context, more detail in regard to the tragic events in Norway. A 37-year-old man was charged on Thursday in connection with a bow and arrow rampage in a small town in Norway that killed 5 people and wounded 3 others in what authorities said was an apparent act of terrorism. Now, there haven't been too many details in regard to these accusations of him being radicalized, but here's what we know so far. The police chief said that the last time concerns about the suspect's radicalization had been brought to the police's attention was last year, but he did not say who had contacted them with those concerns or even specified their nature. He said only that the police had followed up on multiple reports. And by the way, this comes 10 years after a devastating right-wing terrorist attack in Norway, and that was the Breivik attack. It was the worst mass killing in Norway since 2011. I want you to remember that date as we continue talking about this story. 2011, when a far-right extremist killed 77 people, most of them teenagers at a camp. And so I'm gonna get to Lauren Boebert's statement in just a second, but Cenk, did you want to jump in before I do so?
Yeah, just real quick. So killing 5 people with a bow and arrow is extraordinary, but that's my point. It is extraordinary. It is not normal. So what is normal is killing 77 people with guns, which is what Breivik did. What is normal is, unfortunately, is the massacres we have in America pretty much every day. So 5 people were killed. 4 or more people killed is considered a mass shooting in America, and most years we average 1 a day, okay? So when it happens with a bow and arrow, it becomes international news. When it is done with a gun in America, it's not even reported anymore. Oh, another massacre, boring. And we don't even report it anymore because it is so commonplace it would swallow the show whole. And in Vegas, the shooter killed 60 and wounded 411. You cannot do that with bows and arrows or ropes or butter knives. So do guns kill people more efficiently? Hell yes, that's indisputable. And again, only disingenuous people would disagree.
So let's compare Norway and the United States. First off, in the wake of the tragedy, some analysts in the US cited the rampage as proof that strict gun laws, which in Norway include requiring applicants to be at least 18 years old, specify a valid reason for gun ownership, and obtain a government license, are ineffective. One of those lunatics is Lauren Boebert, who said, a man in Norway just killed a bunch of people with a bow and arrow. Norway has some of the strictest gun laws around, yet mass killings still occur. Remember, the last time there was a mass killing was in 2011. Liberals need to understand it is not the gun, it is the criminal who commits the act. All right, let's take a look at the difference between places like Norway and the United States. So murder, by the way, in Norway is incredibly rare. So in a country with a population of just over 5 million, there were 31 murders last year, most involving people who knew each other. Okay, so let's compare the murder rates in the United States, where it's basically 10 times as much. So this is murder rate per capita per 100,000 people. In the United States, it's 4.96. In Norway, it's 0.5. Interesting. Okay, so the fear mongering, they need lax gun laws so everyone can be armed to defend themselves. Now, we are a violent country in the United States, which is, I think, enabled by the fact that we're swimming in a sea of guns. Norway's very different. Let me give you more. Like Americans, many Norwegians do own guns, But according to a Norwegian journalist, the culture of gun ownership is very different in the two countries. So in Norway, for example, it's uncommon to see guns outside organized settings like gun clubs or during hunting season. Okay, so, and I get it, the culture definitely is different. There's this obsession with guns in the United States, whereas in Norway it seems to be more about the utility, right? Using it for hunting, using it as part of this club that you're in. Also, the same journalist says, yes, there's a high percentage of gun ownership in Norway, but those guns are used mainly 1 week in the year during the hunting of elk season. The rest of the year, it's locked down and stored. And that's the other thing. I mean, we have these debates and these discussions about what constitutes common sense gun legislation, but there really isn't much emphasis on gun safety, which is why you see story after story, devastating story after story of a young child finding a gun and accidentally shooting him or herself. And it's devastating. By contrast, millions of Americans have open or concealed carry firearms. So handguns are by far the most common murder weapon in the United States, accounting for 8,029 homicides in 2020 alone. This is followed by firearms of an unstated type with 4,863 cases in that same year. So again, there are some pretty significant differences here. And then finally, one last graphic I'll go to. Let's take a look at this chart. So this is the number of murder victims in the United States in 2020 by weapon used. And at the very top, you see handguns, 8,029. Then there's firearms, the type not stated, 4,863. So the top two are firearms of some sort.
Of course, look guys, it's simple logic. No one can dispute this. Can you kill someone with a rope? Yes. Can you kill someone with a nuke? Yes. If you leave it at that, you really miss the story. Can you kill people easier with a nuke? Can you kill more people with a nuke than a rope? Obviously. Can you kill more people with a gun and easier with a gun than you can with a bow and arrow? Generally speaking, yes, you can kill a lot more people with an AK-47, AR-15. What other examples do I have to give you? Howitzers, RPGs, yes, those things kill people more efficiently. That's why they're used in battlefields. And by the way, the #1 way that people die from guns is suicide. And
that's not even included in those numbers, by the way.
Yeah, because that's about homicides. And we have skyrocketing suicide rates in America, way more than every other country. Why? Because we're drowning in a sea of guns. And finally, oh wow, Norway had gun murders too, or they had 31 homicides, as Anna explained. In 2018 in America, we had 16,214. Now again, per capita, we're a much larger country, but per capita, 10 times worse in America. 10 times worse because everyone has guns. Look, if you're an honest person, that's not a tough question. The facts are overwhelming. You have to go, oh, well, I saw a 1987 study, and plus I like hunting, plus I want to defend myself, plus I don't really care about other human beings. I got you. But if you're just looking at the facts, of course, guns help people kill much more efficiently and much more likely to be used to kill people, including yourself.
All right, let's talk about, well, you know what? The next few stories are actually a lot of fun. So why don't we take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll tell you why Senator Lindsey Graham is terrified of fashionable Brazilians. We'll be right back.
All right, guys, first programming notes. So after the regular show, so in about 24 minutes, we're gonna do Power Hour with Nina Turner. What would she do to deal with those giant pharma ads that are being unleashed now and all the lobbyists in DC? And obviously, both of us struggled with tons of lobbyist money being spent against us. And we're gonna try to figure it out together. That's for the members, tyt.com/join and become a member. So check that out, that's tonight. And then right after that show is gonna be Deep Dive with Jordan Ewell on our Twitch channel. So that's twitch.tv/TYT. Jordan is gonna take the first bullet at 6,200 subscribers if we get there. This is part of the Pocky chip challenge, one chip challenge. He's gonna eat one of those Pocky chips. And if we get to 7,000, I'm gonna eat one of them. But anyway, check out Deep Dive tonight. It's a great show. Now, we're almost at our 20th year anniversary. And so every week we're doing something to celebrate that. And I want to talk a little bit about our impact and some of the bigger moments that we've had here. So we hosted a 99-hour filibuster against the nomination of Samuel Alito. And that was a crazy, crazy thing we did. And you could see all this at tyt.com/impacts. And we stayed on air through day and night to try to create pressure on the Democrats to filibuster them. And believe it or not, that actually worked. And finally, Democrats changed their minds and they did a filibuster. And that was when we were tiny, but we gathered a lot of progressives, the blogosphere and other talk show hosts to make that happen. We were the first, obviously, to cover Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We did 34 videos about her before she won her primary. That's more than the rest of the media combined. We announced the launch of Just Democrats on this show. We pressured elected officials on the $15 minimum wage. Sometimes it gets lost in the shuffle of 20 long years. So go to tyt.com/impacts to see what you guys did. Without you guys, we wouldn't have been able to create any pressure. But we worked together. And that's what helps progressives get elected, progressives get power, and challenge the establishment and the right wing. All right, speaking of which, AJ Tyson Pruitt just joined by hitting the join button below on YouTube. We appreciate it, you're awesome. On Twitch, we had D Rocky gifted 2 subs, T Bartimus gifted a sub, Agnostic Sister gifted a sub, and Moms for a Hot Hassan Piker just became a subscriber through Amazon Prime. That's free for you guys. Figure out how on tyt.com/prime. I don't make up the handles. Burgundy will read anything in the iPad. Okay, but thank you for all the subscribers. I'm hoping we get to 6,999. All right, Jason Ray said Feinstein raised the corporate flag. MLK spoke about folks like her and Ginsburg from a cell in Alabama. She walked it back by saying she shouldn't have spoken at all. She didn't deny the opinion. That's about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I think those are two very different folks. I think Feinstein is very corporate and didn't mind doing things that were racist in the past. Ginsburg, I think, was more of an aberration. That's my opinion. And Vinny Holiday says, I just saw CNN talk to Gupta about this. Even in their own clips, he seems so unsure about his responses, and Joe seems confident. That's what I can't stand. All right, back on TYT, Cenk and Anna with you guys. Phil Jones wrote in on Super Chat. I don't agree with RBG, but that's okay. I don't agree with Cenk or Anna sometimes, and that's okay. By the way, I agree. That's called being a normal person. But on another note, it's my birthday. I'm 40 and I'm able to disagree with my friends. Good for you, I like that. And Phil, I get it. It's a good way for me to say happy birthday. You did it. Congrats.
I'm not going to say happy birthday to Phil. I demand that you agree with me 100% of the time.
Oh, there you go. That's it. Well, you know what? I don't agree with that. Oh my God, we got all these agreements and disagreements as if we're normal human beings.
Happy birthday.
Okay, all right.
All right, let's make fun of Lindsey Graham. Senator Lindsey Graham is terrified about an imminent threat to the United States. What is it? Well, let's watch.
We had 40,000 Brazilians come through the Yuma sector alone, headed for Connecticut, wearing designer clothes and Gucci bags. This is not economic migration anymore. People see an open America, they're taking advantage of us, and it won't be long before a terrorist gets in this crowd.
You heard it here, folks. Lindsey Graham is warning us about Brazilian fashionistas invading our borders with their Gucci bags. I mean, what is next, Cenk?
No,
Couture curriculum in elementary schools. That's what you can expect, okay? And by the way, there's no winning if you happen to be an immigrant. If you're poor, the United States government doesn't want you. If you're wealthy, apparently, the United States fears you as well. I mean, that was insane. That was insane. That was insane.
So we call out BS on our side. Just watch any show, anytime, and you'll see us call out Democrat after Democrat. But the right wing doesn't operate that way. They're just authoritarian. So Lindsey Graham says something that's an obvious, outrageous lie. And Sean Hannity, you think Sean Hannity's gonna correct him? No, because the lying is not the bug, it's the feature. So 40,000 Brazilians in Gucci bags in the Yuma sector. Okay, now let's break down in case there's like 7 of you out there who think that that's a real thing. So if they have Gucci bags, why don't they just fly in? That is how, by the way, most undocumented immigrants come to this country. They fly in. And then they overstay their visa. It's a super easy thing to do, especially if you're wealthy enough to own a Gucci bag. Do you know how easy it is to get a tourist visa and then overstay it? Why would someone wealthy go across the Rio Grande? Why would they go through the desert? And then 40,000 of them at a time with their Gucci bags.
With their Gucci bags.
In the Yuma sector. What is this, like a slow version of Clue?
I just think that Graham's concerned about the fact that they look way more fabulous than he does.
Oh, okay.
No, okay, so.
Colonel Mustard in the den with a candlestick. Guys, how could you not see it isn't true?
No, it's not, obviously it's not true. Okay, so first off, what's really going on here? Is there an influx of undocumented Brazilians? No. However, apparently this year there was a record number of Brazilians who were stopped at our southern border. Were they just let into the country? Of course not. So when he brings up the 40,000 figure, right? Reporters were like, where did you get that figure from? And he's very likely referring to the 42,000 Brazilians that were sent back at our southern border, okay? And by the way, the reporters looked at photos of those migrants as they were trying to come into the country, and none of them had any designer clothing or Gucci bags, like just completely made up stuff, completely. And by the way, what happened to the Republican Party? Remember, Trump was like, no, we'll let immigrants in if they're rich. You gotta prove that you can take care of yourself because we don't want you to, relying on the social safety net. So it's funny because they spent all this time fear-mongering about poor, desperate immigrants seeking asylum. And now they're fear-mongering about fashionistas from Brazil? What?
So by the way, a lot of those folks were Haitians who relocated to Brazil after the last, I shouldn't say last, the earthquake that happened about a decade ago, okay? So a lot of them moved to Brazil, and then the situation in Brazil got so bad and they got so desperate in Brazil because it's also led by a right-wing monster. And so the economy's in tatters, corruption is awful, the usual stuff that happens when the right wing gets into place. But there are a lot of people with Gucci bags, but they're not coming here. They're staying there and having the time of their lives destroying the middle class in Brazil. So people are now leaving Brazil, and a lot of those Haitians that have been living there came up here. And what did we do? As Anna told you, we returned them. We've been actually brutal to Haitian immigrants. But you can't be brutal enough for Lindsey Graham and Sean Hannity. They're gonna lie about you anyway. Joe Biden, you were terrible to the Haitian immigrants. And what did it get you? Did it get you any kind of agreement from the Republicans? Did it get you any compromise from the Republicans? Did it get you a single vote? Did it get you any rhetoric where they say, well, at least Joe Biden was reasonable, he sent back all the Haitians? No, they pretended that you let them all in with their Gucci bags. And so Anna's right, the original thesis for why we can't let any immigrants in. By the way, before, did we let poor immigrants in? By the millions when they were Italian and Irish. And yes, they suffered discrimination, but at the time we didn't need them to have Gucci bags. They had barely survived the famine in Ireland. We let them in because we were decent human beings in America. That was what made us a shining city on a hill. Now you turn around when they're brown and black and you say, I don't want them. And what's your excuse? Oh, because they're gonna come here to mooch off the welfare state. Well, make up your mind. Are they trying to mooch off the welfare state, or do they travel thousands of miles across unbelievable terrain with their Gucci bags? Which one is it? Okay, even every Republican in the audience knows that Lindsey Graham was lying.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And what do we see from members of the Republican Party over and over and over again? As we discuss the current economic situation in the country, as we discuss the budget reconciliation bill, what it includes, how it improves people's lives. Republicans just discuss anything related to culture that could terrify Republican voters, especially the older Republican voters who tend to watch programs on Fox News, right? Be scared, don't pay attention to the fact that we're robbing you, right? That we're corrupt politicians that are allowing pharmaceutical companies to price gouge you. Just focus on the scary Brazilian fashionistas. They're coming for you with their Gucci bags. It's pathetic.
You know, the lobbyist hallway used to be called Gucci Gulch in DC.
Really?
Yeah, and so there's a famous book about it and everything. So this because the lobbyists are rich and represent rich people, so they all had Gucci on. And who is Lindsey Graham's favorite set of people in the world? Lobbyists, who are known to wear Gucci. Guys, again, if you're the most ardent right winger, it doesn't really matter. Okay, you hate immigrants, that's fine, right? I said we'll fight on that a different day. But who do you think is more likely to have Gucci bags? Poor Haitian/Brazilian immigrants that went 1,000 miles to come here without $1 in their pocket, or Lindsey Graham's lobbyist friends? Come on, you know the answer to that. Stop. And by the way, why does Lindsey lie to you all the time if you're a Republican? Because there's no consequences. You got to at some point, if you're a right winger, say, hey, maybe I agree with your policies, but can you stop treating me like I'm an idiot? Because I know you're lying and it's obvious. When you don't say that, he goes, oh, okay, they like it. They like the lies.
I want them to ask better questions though. Like, hey, you are one of the most powerful people, not just in the country, in the world. Why are you allowing pharmaceutical companies to price gouge us?
Yeah, every Republican, including Lindsey Graham, is against negotiating drug prices. What kind of free market capitalism says you can't negotiate? That's the exact opposite of the free market. And that's crony capitalism, corporatism, that's destroying both democracy and capitalism. Lindsey Graham's in favor of it. Why don't you ask him about that? Well, you say, wait, why would you say that we should have higher drug prices? It's gonna cost us $500 billion, the taxpayers. That's $500 billion, Lindsey Graham. Oh, wait a minute, oh, you get tons of money from drug companies. I wonder if that has something to do with it. You know who actually is 40,000 strong with Gucci bags? Pharma company lobbyists who are invading Washington right now and spending tens of millions of dollars on scummy politicians like Lindsey Graham.
All right, next story is also fun. Let's dunk on Dave. So, conservatives like Dave Rubin are obsessing over Washington football team coach John Gruden resigning after his racist, misogynistic, and homophobic emails were uncovered. Now, some of those emails, by the way, were as recent as 2018, just important context for you to know about. In one of the emails, he referred to Roger Goodell as the F word that's used as a gay slur. That content's all super relevant, okay? As we hear from David Harris Jr. on Newsmax attempting to defend Gruden.
We're still seeing in this era of woke culture, people trying to dig through people's past lives, emails. Who was holding something over Gruden that said, if you don't do this or that or whatever, or just had it out for him and said, I'm going to release these. You know, I read portions of the email for him to refer to to a black man and say he had lips the size of Michelin tires. You know what happened to some good old fashioned football humor and banter? I don't think that means he's a racist. I think people want to, you know, he didn't say he was black. He didn't throw color out there. But again, it's like, you know, who can't get canceled when somebody can be dissected and have their life and their emails gone through for decades to find one thing or a slew of things using a derogatory term for homosexual. You know what? Over in Europe, the word it's actually for a cigarette. So who knows if that's what he was talking about?
No, that full word that's used as a gay slur, and he actually said the full word on air, is not used as for cigarettes.
That's the shorter version.
The shorter version is,
it's
yeah.
FAG.
Yeah.
But guys, let me ask you a serious question. Even if you're a right winger, have you ever in your entire life heard someone use that F word here in America to mean cigarette? And especially about a gay person. Oh, there's a gay person, and I'm gonna call him that word. Oh, I meant a cigarette, that was an honest mistake. No, in the emails, Gruden refers to gay people,
right,
and people he thinks are acting weak and hence gay as the F word. He doesn't ask for a cigarette. So why do I tell you that? Because it's an obvious absurd defense meant to excuse what he's saying with sophistry. You know that's not a real defense. You could say, hey, I don't care. I don't like gay people either. Or he was joking. There's a lot of different defenses, right? The one that I thought was most likely was that he was joking. But you read the emails, it turns out he's not joking at all. In fact, he tried to keep a gay player out of the league. He said that we don't want queers in the league, and the commissioner should do something about it. He should call the coach and make sure that guy doesn't get drafted. That's not a joke. He hates gay people so much. He was trying to ruin their careers. That's who John Gruden is. Look, guys, getting canceled, it happens all the time. It's happened to me, quote unquote, getting canceled, right? And going back, the right wing went back 19 years to find quotes about me from back when I was a Republican, right? So does that happen? Yes, it happens. But were you joking? Did you change? John Gruden hasn't changed at all. He wasn't joking at all, and he took specific action to try to ruin other people's career. You know what that is? That's cancel culture. John Gruden tried to get that player canceled because he was gay. Now we're gonna cry over John Gruden getting fired. By the way, he's making $10 million a year. So he already made $40 million from the Raiders. He'll probably get a giant buyout, make another $20 million. We're supposed to cry over him? Get out of here. Now, of course, we're gonna go to Dave Rubin.
Yeah, can I let me talk for a second because I have a lot to say. First of all, yes, the context matters, but also this notion, I'm actually against going back decades to find some terrible stuff on social media and then judge someone based on what was said decades ago. That's not what happened here. This was part of an investigation into workplace abuse / malpractice with the Washington football team. Okay, and through that investigation, they found these emails, which reinforced the notion that it was an abusive work environment, right? It's a sport, but it's still work. There's a gay player on the team. So maybe it's relevant that the coach for this team that has a gay player, an openly gay player, is saying these types of things in emails, right? So again, that context matters. There's also the fact that some of the cheerleaders for that team, topless photos of them were shared by Gruden. Like, these are relevant things. In any other workplace context, it's unacceptable, right? But this is the latest in their culture war defense of bad behavior. It's not a surprise that Newsmax would have a black guy on to defend Gruden's behavior, and then you're about to hear from a gay guy who's gonna defend Gruden's behavior. So let's hear what Dave Rubin, who never misses an opportunity to tell people that he's gay, has to say about Gruden.
On David Harris's point about big lips, I'm here in Los Angeles, and big lips have nothing to do with skin color. It's basically a botched injection job over in Beverly Hills. That's number one. That goes across black, white, Asian, I don't care. Does any of this feel like we're becoming more tolerant as a society? But now that we've executed John Gruden, he's gone, he's excommunicated, he will no longer go to nice parties, he will no longer be able to have his cushy job and all that stuff. Does society feel more tolerant? Do we feel more diverse? Do we feel more decent? Are we healing anymore? Aunt Jemima's not on syrup bottles and Uncle Ben's not on rice. So I guess only white people can be on products now. I mean, is any of this making any of it better? It's only making it worse.
Look, I mean, that kind of disgusting defense of bigotry, of homophobia, got Dave Rubin a $5 million home. So that's why he does it. And it's just so sick to be used as like a prop for the right wing like that.
No, there isn't any home large enough to justify debasing yourself like that. That guy just said the F word and thought it was no big deal. And Rubin's like, oh yeah, it's no big deal. I'm here to tell you that you can beat up on gays rhetorically, verbally. You can call us any names. And where's my money? Where's my money? Say anything you want about gays. Where's my money? That's who Dave Rubin is. What a sad, pathetic character. Now imagine, look, I was born a Muslim background, right? And I'm atheist now. But if somebody's on TV with me, even if I agree with them, and then all of a sudden they say, call Muslims ragheads is no big deal. You think I'm just sit there and take it? And if my job is to go and go, oh yeah, of course they're ragheads. Oh, you pathetic, pathetic creature. If he sleeps well at night, I feel even worse for him. I mean, apparently he has no empathy, no sense of self, nothing. What a vile creature. Okay, now let's talk about, there's no more tolerance. Oh, we're supposed to have tolerance for John Gruden, who says hateful things. But where was our tolerance for Michael Sam? He's the gay player that Gruden was trying to keep out of the league.
I mean, spare me the stuff about tolerance coming from a guy who said that progressivism is a mental illness.
Yeah,
okay,
while pretending to be a progressive. I mean, hilarious.
Yeah.
And there's no, the comment about the African-American person's lips is a clear reference to a racist trope that's been around for a long time in this country. Dave knows that, the other guy knows that, but their job is to come and say, oh no, you guys are right. You're racist and homophobic people. You're right. Where's the money? Where's the money? Where's the money? You're right. Call us anything you want. Talk about our lips, to say that we look like animals, say that, keep us out of the league, make sure we don't have careers, hate us to oblivion, but where's my check? That's who Dave Rubin is. These guys are disgusting.
All right, we don't have enough time for another story.
Okay, all right, I'm gonna, look, Power Hour with Nina Turner is next. We're gonna got Hero of the Week, the Villain of the Week, and we're gonna talk about what would Nina do, and it's a tough one, Jesus. How are we gonna deal with these pharma ads and these lobbyists and the corporate Democrats? And we're gonna try to break that down tonight and have a great conversation about it. It's a great time to become a member, tyt.com/join. If you're watching on YouTube, you can hit it right, the button, join button right below the video. If it's on mobile, you gotta scroll down a little bit further, but you'll see it down there. Okay, look, one last thing on the Washington story. The cheerleaders are now saying, no, we have to see all the emails, because that was our boss, not Gruden, but the guy he was emailing with, Bruce Allen.
Yep.
And he's passing around naked pictures of us. I mean, you want to talk about sexual harassment at the office? They're passing around naked pictures or topless pictures of the woman who worked there. So what else did they say about them? What else did they think about them? What else did they do to them about their careers, their jobs, etc.? So when you're ruining the lives and the careers of the cheerleaders and Michael Sam and all the other people, conservatives are not at all concerned about cancel culture. But when it's someone who's a rich white male who's a Republican, all of a sudden it's cancel culture. All right, we'll see you in Power Hour.
What's happening? I'm Rashad Richey, host of Indisputable with Dr. Rashad Richey right here on TYT.